Hi everybody and welcome to the deep dive. In today's video I'm going to run down a few reasons why you really need to experience a liveaboard. So there are three main types of scuba diving. Shore dives, where you just walk into the water from the shore and then you just walk out at the end of the dive like an animal. Day boats, where you load up all of your gear in the morning onto the boat, you do your dives and then you return to the harbour at the end of the day, taking all of your stuff with you. And then there's liveaboards, which are basically floating hotels with a dive deck on the back. With the liveaboard, you take all of your stuff with you on board at the beginning of the trip, and the boat then heads out, but it doesn't come back to shore until the very end of the trip a few days later. Now, this has a few key benefits, and while it may seem the more expensive option to start with, it can actually be the cheaper option in the long run. So let's dive a little bit deeper and see why you need to experience a liveaboard. Day boats and shore dives are great and all, but the dive sites that you can reach are fairly limited. Traveling long distances on the side of a rib or literally swimming in on the surface is just tough work, but a liveaboard is large enough to smooth out a lot of those waves. And when the boat is actually traveling to a new dive site, you're putting your feet up with a drink and a good book. You see, liveaboards, they start the trip at harbour and then they bounce between different dive sites for the rest of the week before they then head back. That way you can reach dive sites that are further out, that fewer people get to see, and they're also nice and quiet as well. Because liveaboards don't need to return to harbour so often, you can reach a heck of a lot of dive sites, and the good ones too, not just the ones nearby. Popular dive sites are better to dive on a liveaboard as well. The day boats, they all crowd the dive sites at key times when they get there, but after they've set sail back to shore, you can stay and then dive that dive site again after they've all left. So whilst other divers are fighting to see an overcrowded dive site, you have it almost all to yourself to just dive at your leisure. I know it's obvious that you'd dive on a dive trip, but on most day boats, you'll get 2 dives a day in your dive package, maybe a third if you're lucky and they have the tanks for it. But in a lot of cases, you'll actually have to pay for that extra third dive. The third dive isn't included in your dive package. But on a liveaboard, I mean, I've been on some where you get 4 dives a day, every single day. So if you really want to rack up your dive count, a liveaboard is a great idea. 3 dives in the day and then 1 in the evening for some night dives as well, so you can see 1 dive site in a whole range of different conditions. It can get to the point on some liveaboards where you actually want to skip some dives. 4 dives a day can be quite tough, and the schedule can be a bit much at times. I mean, it is going to be 6 a.m. wake-up calls for a dive before breakfast, but there's no obligation for you to go on every single dive, but they are all included in your package, so dive as much or as little as you like. On a lot of liveaboards, nitrox is actually free or included in the price. So you can actually dive nitrox for the entire trip if you want as well. Just double check what's included in your dive package. The food on board is outstanding for the conditions and the supplies that they have. At the beginning of the trip, they'll run through any food allergies and food preferences so that they know that that everybody will have a choice to eat. After that, you'll be offered food and drink just constantly, basically. Meal times, you'll get a choice of what you want to eat, at least on the liveaboards that I've always been on. Obviously, they can't order you a pizza or Chinese or whatever, but there's usually a large enough choice for every single meal that everybody is well fed, and there are snacks available at all times, along with soft drinks and good old-fashioned cold water. It truly is amazing what the crew manage if just the space that they have, because they're fairly cramped quarters behind the scenes. But I've been on a liveaboard, and towards the end of the trip, where we've been at sea for 3 or 4 days, someone mentions, oh, it's their birthday, and the crew managed to bake and ice a 2 or 3 tier cake for them from scratch, which is incredible. There's also the additional cost as well that you need to consider with your food when you're going on holidays. You never have to worry about finding a restaurant on a liveaboard or sort of working out the tips each day and paying for dinner. So whilst the initial cost of the trip may be more than a shore-based trip, by the end you can actually end up saving some money on a liveaboard. Diving on a liveaboard is much easier and much more civilized than shore diving or day boats. On a liveaboard, most liveaboards I've ever been on, you strap your tank, your BCD onto your tank on day one, boom, and that's it, you're set up. The crew will refill that tank between dives where it sits. You get your own little space on a bench. Smaller boats just don't have the infrastructure to refill tanks on the go, but a liveaboard is going to have compressors and whips that can reach each and every one, so they just top up your tanks after each dive. Yeah, you'll have that spot on your bench, and that is kind of yours where all your stuff is. So after a dive, you just unscrew your regulators and then the crew just does the rest. So the most you really have to do is just refit your regulators and jump in the water. You're literally eating and sleeping at a dive center, so you're never more than a few steps away from the dive deck. And like most dive centers, it's not particularly fancy, so most people are just in board shorts and t-shirts the whole time. You're not going to need to do your hair up or dress up nice and fancy for dinner or anything. Most people are just barefoot the whole time anyway. When you're not diving, you're either going to be eating, sleeping, or just chatting, basically. Liveaboards, they're not overly taxing outside of your early morning wake-up calls and just physically diving. That's the only thing that's going to tire you out, really. So liveaboards really are great, and you shouldn't rule them out just because the price tag is higher on the comparison website, because in the long run, when you consider food costs and the extra dives included, they actually can work out a lot cheaper. Sure, you don't get to experience as much of the local culture and the sights on dry land, but that's what your last day is for before you fly back. That's what you do on your final day. You sort of see the local sights and then you fly off back home. But anyway, let us know your favorite liveaboard that you've ever been on and why down in the comments so that others can get some ideas of where to go next. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.